Okay, this is the first artist that we're going to look at. This is Roy Lichtenstein. And Roy Lichtenstein had a very unique style, as you can see in this OK Hotshot painting that he did. These are actually paintings. They're in the comic book fashion in that he was taking industrial art or artwork that you would find in a magazine or a comic book and turning it into fine artwork. So these are painted on very large canvases. In fact, if you were standing next to one of these, he'd probably be about this tall. And what we can see in his artwork is that it's a narrative, but we don't know what the story is. So, in looking at it, sometimes it's interesting or fun to just try to interpret like what is the story behind it, even though it's not really part of a story. There are some social commentary in some of his artwork, maybe some anti-war stuff or maybe about relationships and so forth. But for the most part, he was just kind of having fun turning his industrial art into a fine art. So on the next page here, this is what you have to do in your art appreciation books is you have to write down the artist's name, Roy Lichtenstein, and you should have a blank spots for all these. And then the title, OK Hotshot, 1963. Acrylic and oil paint. He used a couple of different mediums at different times. And this work is displayed at the Castelli Gallery in New York, New York. And that was actually the first gallery to show a lot of his artwork. So what you could do is you could just pause the video right now, and then that'll give you some time to type this up. Okay, so just to move on, we've briefly discussed some of these elements of art: space, line, balance, color, shape, texture, form, and value. And when we look at some of this artwork, like Roy Lichtenstein here, we can identify or see what the most predominant elements of art that are in there. So in this one, I think we see a focus on the color. There are the primary colors here. You see blue, or it's kind of a bluish purple, yellow, and red. So we could go ahead and just circle that in our art appreciation book. So focus on color. There's also some value there too. He's focusing on the shadows of his face and so forth. So there's some value to it in that it looks three-dimensional to some degree, even though it is a cartoon. And then somewhat of a focus on line. Okay, there are some line elements here, and using just simple contour lines to define the different shapes of things, like the explosion right here and so forth. So what you want to do is just take a few moments and just finish these sentence starters. So like, in this piece I see. So maybe you see, just what it is. I see a man who's in a dogfight, in airplanes. Or perhaps you see a man that's screaming because he's about ready to be shot down. And it says, OK hotshot, OK I'm pouring. So it probably means like he's pouring with sweat because he's stressed out from the dogfight, perhaps. So just take a moment and do that. And the next, what you believe the artist is trying to represent, say, or show, say, or point out. So all you have to do here is, I believe the artist is trying to, and you can maybe circle one of these words, like show us, perhaps, the horrors of being in a dogfight in war. Or maybe he's trying to represent or just show us how stressful it would be to be attacked by another airplane if you're a pilot. So just take a few moments and do that. And remember, you can just pause the video when you stop to like write this stuff down. And then the next part is like what I liked or didn't like about this piece. So if you like it, you just circle what I like about it. And so if you like it, you just kind of explain like, oh, I like it because of the colors, or maybe it seems like something I would hang, in my living room in my first apartment. Or if you don't like it, maybe I don't like it because there's too much, it's too cartoony, or it's not my style, something like that. And then the last part here, Another piece of this artist work that stood out to me was, I'm just going to put the title of another one of his pieces of artwork that we're going to look at in just a moment, and then just explain because why. So if we go ahead and move forward here, this is a picture of Roy Lichtenstein back in the 1960s, and you can see he's not really like the most handsome man in the world. He's kind of dorky looking, I mean, with the bow tie there and so forth. I always thought he kind of looked like Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man. But you can see how big his artwork is behind him. These are part of the War series that was published in a magazine, and then later he put it in this gallery. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the scale of his drawings. This one's called Sweet Dreams Baby from 1963. And again, just thinking about the fact that he's taking artwork and turning it into fine artwork, but still holding the aesthetics of what it is to like look at a comic book. So when you look really close, you can see in these areas where he has the little pixels, almost like you blew up part of the comic book or something. So seeing those little pixels, and I'm not quite sure how he paints those. Maybe he uses a little stencil so he can get the little pattern, but it kind of adds some texture to it, which is an element of art as well. So it almost feels like you could go and touch it, perhaps. So that's Sweet Dreams Baby. This one is part of that War series again, and the caption reads, "I depressed the fire control, and ahead of me rockets blaze through the sky." And this is actually two different panels put together. You can see the seam right there. So these are meant to be side by side when viewed or owned or something. And here you see maybe the other side of that dogfight. Maybe the man that we saw earlier is in this cockpit, and the man that's attacking him is in this cockpit here. Perhaps. And this one's called Wham. Next up, this is a series he did where he introduces this guy named Brad, and the caption reads, "Why, Brad, darling, this piece is a masterpiece, or this painting is a masterpiece. My, soon all of New York will be clamoring for your work." And the idea is that, remember the picture of Roy. He's not very handsome. He's kind of dorky looking guy. But he has this alter ego, and his name is Brad, and it's this guy. And Brad is also an artist, and Brad is good with the ladies. You could see in his face he's very confident. Maybe just the opposite of Roy Lichtenstein himself. So this one's called Masterpiece, and it just shows us his other alter ego named Brad. This could be Brad here too, and I think we saw this the other day, where we see this couple in a car. And remember, it's not part of a story, but what's fun about looking at his paintings is you look at it and you try to interpret your own story on it. So like, what is going on in this scene? So maybe this guy is upset with this girl, maybe they're dating, maybe they're spies, maybe he found out she's cheating on him, maybe she just broke up with him and he's looking at her like with contempt, perhaps. So this one's called In the Car. This one's called Vicky, and I'm not sure the characters in this, but what's interesting is the texture with all the dots. It's almost like pointillism, which is a style of art, where the dots are just repetitive to create the skin tone in these characters. And it reads, "Vicky, I thought I heard your voice." So maybe Vicky's been spying on him, or maybe perhaps this is Brad. Who knows? This next one, the caption reads, "I don't care. I'd rather sink than call Brad for help." So perhaps this is all symbolism, the water. Maybe she's drowning in her tears, perhaps. So maybe she isn't actually drowning, or maybe she is. We don't quite know the story, but it's kind of fun to read into it, just to try to determine it for yourself. So maybe Brad broke up with her, being the guy that he is, and kind of left her brokenhearted, and she's wallowing in self-pity, of course. This one's called I Don't Care. And another woman, perhaps crying over Brad again. This Brad's kind of a mean guy to the ladies, perhaps, and she's crying over. You see the tears there, and this is very common. It's like a thought bubble, so she's thinking of him, and it's called Of Him. So So maybe this is a girl that Brad just broke up with, and it reads, or her thought bubble says, "I know how you must feel, Brad, but maybe I'm in love with you too," or something like that, right? So this one's called "I Know, Brad." Uh, this one's called "Oh Jeff, I Love You Too," but it's really easy to remember the titles of these paintings because it's usually in the caption. But perhaps I always imagine that maybe Jeff is her ex-boyfriend or maybe her fiance, and he's telling her like, "I love you, Vicky," or whatever her name is. "I love you too, but perhaps I'm in love with Brad," right? So it's always back to Brad, that womanizing artist that's Roy's alter ego. Um, this one's called Maybe, and it reads, "Maybe he became ill and couldn't leave the studio." So I always imagine here that, she's dressed up, she has her gloves on, her hair's all done, she's ready for a night out on the town. Brad's supposed to pick her up, but maybe he's standing her up. She hasn't showed up yet. What's going on? Maybe Brad did become ill, or maybe, maybe he's out with some other woman. You never know. And this is kind of a different series. It isn't about relationships or anything. Maybe a little social commentary. Um, there's nothing more electrically charged like a gun pointing at you, so it's kind of like a scary thing here to have this gun pointing at you. And notice the texture and the points there. It's kind of interesting. And that's it for Roy. So what you want to do after looking at all these images is right here, another piece by this artist's work that stood out to me was, and then right here you want to explain another one that you saw. So maybe it's Sweet Dreams Baby, and you liked it or didn't like it because of whatever reason, or Wham, or Masterpiece, or one of these. And you could just go ahead and rewind the video and look at them again if you kind of forget. So that is Roy Lichtenstein